Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 20 team selection. We've just come off of Game Week 19, which was pretty horrendous for myself. We dropped from, I think, around 10k or 9k in the world to 15,000 and didn't really get any points this week. We were close to points. Double Arsenal defense was sort of the needle in the haystack, I suppose, where Gabriel and Timber obviously managed to squeeze in that clean sheet. And then Aston Villa had two significantly good chances and scored with one of them at the end of the game. So bit of a tough one because I think in terms of like decision making this week, jumping just straight into my Game Week 19 team, I had two decisions to sort of make this game week in 19. I really wanted to either do, a Hincapié to Gabriel move if I felt like Calafiori might be fine, or I was going to do Semenyo to Szoboszlai just to actually get a little bit of money in the bank and to get a player with a good home game on paper and, give myself some funds and then kind of reassess with a Hincapié move depending on what Calafiori's news would be. So unfortunately, I didn't do Hincapié to Gabriel. And I think that type of decision making in terms of FPL, I think I'm perfectly feeling fine by. Does it feel awful to have a 13-point swing just from that alone? Yeah. Not to mention that Semenyo himself also got an assist, so I think he outscored Sobo, who isn't a pick that I love, but I think is very much akin to a lot of the kind of players that we tend to own now this season in the midfield, where as long as you have some set piece share, have some chance of getting goals in open play, have decent DEFCON numbers, you're a pretty good pick in FPL. So with the context of Semenyo probably leaving towards City, and it seems like, to be honest, he's going to play versus Arsenal now. We'll have to just see what happens there. But we do have Sobo in the team. We do have Hincapié. I have made an early move, Hincapié to Gabriel. Part of this is because I think if I look at Hincapié as a pick, he was always going to be a placeholder for Gabriel. So what I was trying to do was trying to find that needle in the haystack where you get Hincapié to Gabriel on a week where Hincapié suddenly looks a little bit more flimsy as a pick. And then I moved to Gabriel. What's kind of made me go to Gabriel now is, well, Gabriel's round. He's back. I know the 0.45 million of price rises is coming anyways, and I don't really want to deal with that in terms of, I guess, pricing myself out of an optimal team in the future. So if Hincapié to Gabriel was always a move that I planned for this game week, I don't really mind going a little bit early because a lot of the players that I still have for the rest of this week probably actually would necessitate me actually taking a hit. We've got a couple issues in the team still, right? Keane is injured, but we don't know what the injury is because Moyes hasn't really explained it. It could even be illness, but we don't know. With Richards, it's just a case of he clearly has an injury that prevents him from actually playing football, in the sense that you have to put a football boot on. He's probably in way too much pain to be able to even manage that situation. So we just have to continue to wait for Richards. And I think with Richards, the key thing here is holding Richards is beneficial, I would say, for that run of games in Game Week 24 and beyond. But for now, it's not like he's particularly useful, particularly in this game week where we've got Newcastle away anyways. So ideally, I get Keane back for Brentford at home, which I think is just an amazing game on paper. And I don't have to call upon someone like Anderson, although we've just seen Liverpool, give a clean towards Leeds with plenty of chances, to be fair, or rather one big chance and then actually some small chances over the course of the game. Nico O'Reilly seems like he's not fine. I think he got subbed off at 57 minutes, but I think people are overreacting to the idea that he's injured. I don't think he's injured. I just think he played a poor match. Ake coming back into the side and actually, being a part of the team is significant because Pep's already mentioned a couple times this season that Guardiola's been playing through knocks. So I think the reason actually for why, let's say, Ake was starting was, for Guardiola, not for any particular reason of wanting to, I guess, manage the minutes of Nico O'Reilly. But as it turned out, O'Reilly had a pretty poor game, and I think Guardiola came on, and Nico O'Reilly kind of limped off the pitch, as people like to say, but that doesn't really mean that they're injured, just like Ekitike last week, and he's just completed another 90-minute game. So from that as context, I think it's probably the end of the line soon for Nico O'Reilly, especially when you kind of compare it to Matheus Nunes. There's no one really giving him serious competition in that role that he's playing. Like, I think even when we've seen Rico Lewis substitutions recently, it's not actually been for Matheus Nunes. He kind of plays all the minutes, and he's going to get rested in cup matches. So does it make sense to suddenly pivot towards Nunes as a pick? I'm not so sure, but I think Nico O'Reilly will be sold soon, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a City player, because I think the idea of actually going for, let's say, maybe another pick, like maybe a Tarkowski or Collins, is a bit more appealing to me so that I can stay flexible with Triple City. It could even be that because I love Turkey so much that I could revisit him. And I think, yes, of course, Semenyo coming back into the team is significant, but then you've also seen that City have just lost Savinho. So it's not like they actually have that much depth. And I feel like the depth will only impact first Reinders, who, as I mentioned within the cheat sheet, is not someone that I'm going to give a boost because of the incoming players. And then I suppose it's more a case of when you look at someone like Bernardo, I think he probably still loses minutes first, as can be seen with the the Reinders substitution within this match for Sunderland, where Bernardo comes off the pitch and actually Reinders is the one who comes on for him. So I think Turkey's actually still in a really good spot in FPL, and maybe just simply moving off of Nico Riley can let me get back into him. Say if I don't want someone like Cunha in my team by the time he plays Man City, and neither do I want Bruno because it's City and Arsenal, it could be the case that I go for someone like a Ryan Cherky, and we could revisit that, as I said, in a few weeks' time. The main issue with the midfield, I think, right now from a template perspective is I don't see Palmer's minutes being really good enough. But by game week 22, is that going to massively change? Maybe the new manager's going to come in and completely change that, but I don't really, have too keen an idea on how important Palmer is right now, just because the minutes aren't good enough. But we could probably once again reassess with the next two games, as that gives us a little bit of breathing room to kind of think about whether we want Cole Palmer in our team in Game 22 or whether we actually just want to wait for Game 24 instead, where still the Chelsea fixture run looks tremendous from 24 onwards. But yeah, that's kind of the situation of my team. We got 33 points, and let's just move into this game week's odds, because everyone else is fortunately fine within the team, and we even got some Enzo Lefebvre DEFCON. So those are things that we can be happy about and just move on with life with. In terms of Premier League predictions, so we've got 11-5's odds here for this game week, where we've got Game week 20, and I think it's a bit of a mediocre game week for most teams. Brighton obviously have the standout game because they get to play Burnley. City actually still having really high clean sheet, or not clean sheet odds, but actually like expected goal odds is interesting. Otherwise, I think this is a pretty mediocre game week where a lot of good teams have a tough team on paper, but there's maybe opportunities to get clean sheets from a lot of different sources, right? So going back to it, Brighton, even both teams in terms of Everton and Brentford, I think if you have a Collins or a Tarkowski, I'd play both of them. Liverpool, just because the actual clean sheets on offer this week that you'd be invested into are not very high. Like Spurs have an extremely high clean sheet odd, but is it likely that you're owning a Spurs defender still? Maybe if you've kept Van de Ven all this time, this is the game week to go for him. But that's pretty much it. Like even Arsenal, for example, in a week like this where they're playing versus Bournemouth away, and Bournemouth are a very good attacking team, they've got undeniably good clean sheet odds, and so this is a game week where I think it's very both teams to score, unless the teams that are expected to score aren't very good at creating chances, like, as I said, the Everton versus Brentford game. So it becomes a case of hoping, I think, that your team who has, let's say, tougher games on paper, so Liverpool players, for example, with myself, Ekitike, and Sobo, being able to overperform a little bit within the confines of this game week. Otherwise, I think it's actually a good opportunity still to play some of the City players because, as you can see, there's not too many great fixtures on offer. So I wouldn't feel bad about playing City players at home versus Chelsea. I wouldn't feel too bad about, as I said, playing the Arsenal players versus Bournemouth because that's still one of the better games this game week with the team strength taken into account. So something to think about there. In terms of, what other moves that I could actually make, I've actually had to play around with my suggested transfers on Fantasy Football Hub, which you can actually use as well within the link in the description below. It actually confirmed to me I should do Hincapié to Gabriel as well, which is probably the move, as I said, that I'm going to make. However, there's potential for me to take a hit. And that's because if, let's say, O'Reilly actually has an issue, maybe I take a hit. I don't think O'Reilly has an issue. I think he's fine. But Keane certainly could have an issue, and I might still have to make a transfer out. And I think if I was to, let's say, transfer out a certain player, it would probably make sense to actually transfer out Richards, because if Richards is out and I need maybe Keane, and Keane could come back for Wolves at home, it doesn't make sense for me to actually suddenly take out Keane if he's available for that game. Whereas with Richards, as I mentioned, he's someone that I would like to have for Game Week 24, but it's not essential that I have him for Game Week 24 because we're also starting to see that Palace aren't playing particularly good as a team. By the time Game Week 24 comes around, I'm not sure how invested I am into owning a Palace player. Or at the same time, if that Palace player that I might own could be someone like maybe a Nathaniel Klein. And instead of owning, let's say, Richards at 4.5 or 4.4, whatever his price is going to be at that time, I could just benefit with a little bit more money in the bank. So we're continuing to manage that situation. But for my team and how I'm supposed to line up this week, based on the clean sheet odds, I think it still makes sense to actually play Nico O'Reilly, Keane, and Gabriel. Those are the players that I'm expecting to play alongside Raya. Really looking forward to an Arsenal double up as per usual. Hopefully, it doesn't end so poorly like the previous Arsenal double up that I've had has gone. But O'Reilly is someone that I still think I would play, tentatively speaking, over Anderson and Richards just because of the fixtures, right? I think it's unlikely that Anderson keeps a clean sheet versus Liverpool, whereas I think there's actually a decent chance of Nico O'Reilly actually being able to do so, at least at home at the Etihad. But it's all conditional on what I think his minutes will be. Because if I think O'Reilly is once again prone to another 60-minute substitution, which he really is, like let's say if you think that Ake can't play two fixtures or two starts in a week, then it's very plausible he can still come off the bench and actually Guardiola can still insert himself back into the left back position if the substitutes become something like O'Reilly to Ake. So I think that's kind of the problem that Nico O'Reilly currently poses, where because he's in that threshold or that territory of being able to be subbed off at 60 minutes, he's someone who's probably not worth playing most of the time in FPL. It just so happens that Anderson and Richards have really, really uniquely poor games for me. But as I said, if Keane is out, but it seems to be short term, let's say he could be back for Wolves at home, I can see myself taking a hit out of Nico O'Reilly. So O'Reilly to Collins and Tarkowski, both of them actually look really appealing to me. Tarkowski specifically in the context where if I'm backing Everton anyways as a team versus Brentford, I would rather go for Tarkowski. But if let's say Keane is out, I probably would actually just go for Collins because Collins is cheaper. And he's actually shown that he's a bit of a monster in DEFCON himself. I mean, if you look at the performance versus Tottenham, great sort of game. Perfect scenario for a defender to get a 0-0 and then triple bonus and all the DEFCONs and stuff like that. But also just the context of this season, I think Collins is actually one of the best defensive contributors of the game. This season, a Senesi has been, the absolute best defender of the game for DEFCON, but not too far behind are players like Anderson, Virgil, Lacroix, Richards, Tarkowski, and Collins. And so at that point, you're basically just saying who has the best clean sheet odds, what sort of player is actually going to optimize my team a little bit. And I think Collins kind of hits that sweet spot where, at least in the short term for Brentford, he's got incredible fixtures. Not to mention that actually, I think when you kind of compare Tarkowski and Collins and kind of view them as long-term picks, I think that the main benefit towards Collins as a player is that Brentford's fixture run actually gets really good in a few game weeks' time. So even though they have some really tough fixtures around 25, 26, which I think is Newcastle, Arsenal, after that, they've actually got a tremendous run of games. Whereas when you actually look at, let's say, Everton's fixture run, this is the fixture run, right? So you get a couple good games here, but then the problem becomes around game week 27, I would say, where they play United at home. And then the run of games after that looks really, really, really poor up until literally game week 34. The only good game between that run is Burnley at home. Otherwise, they're playing Newcastle, Arsenal, Chelsea, Brentford, Liverpool. So that's the thing too. Like when I'm buying a defender now, I'm thinking, how long term can a defender be? And I think both of them are great. So it really just comes down to the circumstance of, do I think Keane's going to play? And does, let's say, Tarkowski bolster my team? And do I kind of chance it? Especially since I don't own a Brentford attacker. So something I think about, as I said, is actually taking a hit this week. But for now, we're tentatively playing Nico O'Reilly. I do think I could switch to Anderson, like in a worst case scenario where I'm not thinking O'Reilly's going to play good minutes. But for now, I'm kind of hoping that maybe he can squeeze another 60-minute game and maybe get a clean sheet out of it, a la someone like Gabriel without the goal. In the midfield position, I'm actually going with Lefay, Sobo, Foden, Saka, Cunha. The big positive for Lefay was he actually did not get a yellow card versus Man City, which means that he's available to play versus Tottenham away. He got DEFCON versus Man City, which is positive. I think Xhaka also got DEFCON. So did Ryan Cherky. So a couple players, interestingly, getting DEFCON in that match. I think not so surprising in terms of the midfielders because we were expecting Sunderland to field Lefay in a different way. And I think he actually played a relatively decent game. So I'm looking forward to him in a slightly easier match, although Tottenham have actually been pretty strong at home, at least in terms of the defensive numbers. So I'm not expecting a lot here from Lefay. This is just a case of in game weeks like this where you don't have a great team, you're just fielding what you can. And I think Lefay is a very plausible player. Sobo, similar situation to that, looking forward more so to Burnley at home, but we'll have to keep him for Arsenal away. I don't feel too bad about owning Sobo and Ekitike, to be quite honest. I think Ekitike, to me, when I watch Liverpool play, is someone who still soaks up absolutely all the chances and even creates some of them himself. So I don't feel too bad about owning this forward in the game when we know forwards have been really, really poor. Ekitike almost feels like an upgraded version of Bowen, where if you want to make the argument that all the goals come through Bowen, I think all the goals do come from Ekitike. And it is weird to sort of talk about Liverpool in this sense, but they just haven't been that good this season at all. And so it's nice to still have the main focal point of the team from an attacking point of view, because that's still an aspect of the game where Liverpool actually look quite decent. When Thiago has really poor numbers, when other forwards have really poor minutes, I don't feel so bad about owning Ekitike. And with Sobo, he's not very different to many of the midfielders that we're kind of shopping for, right? Lots of people with slightly less team value might just simply going for an Anton Stack. I don't think conceptually there's a huge difference between someone like an Anton Stack and a Sobo. You saw that Sobo could have maybe got an assist if, let's say, Virgil was to score one of the chances that he got versus Leeds, and we've seen that before as well. So I think Sobo's very much like most of the midfielders that we're trying to own right now, who has roots towards those points, and hopefully we'll get them over this run, including a fixture which is going to be Burnley at home. And I think that Burnley at home fixture is interesting from a Liverpool standpoint, because for most people in FPL on that game week in Game Week 22, a lot of people are making moves, right? I am trying to find a way towards Palmer in Game Week 22 because Cunha is going to be playing versus Man City. However, that game is City at home, so I don't think that's super awful for Cunha. I guess the argument that I'm making here is most people will be making moves in Game Week 22, but I think by owning these Liverpool players, I'll have a pretty good team then. So it's a luxury for me to actually be able to make moves in Game Week 22, whereas I could really just be making my moves in Game Week 24 instead. And I think a lot of these Liverpool players will be that sort of cash cow in Game Week 24, including someone like Ekitike, right? Where the fixture run is not very good anyways. After that Burnley at home match, you can sell these types of players in Game Week 23 if you wanted to, but I think Bournemouth being such a poor defense probably means you keep them until Game Week 24. And then it's, Newcastle and City and Sunderland away, which are all pretty tough games. Oddly, Liverpool have a great run 28 onwards, so it's also a case of, I think by that time, do we think anything has dramatically changed with this Liverpool team for me to go away from these Liverpool picks? And equally, are there any other contenders in the game who, are a bit more interesting? So let's say I've probably missed the boat in terms of going for Bruno G. I think Rodgers is someone who actually has kind of like up and down fixtures for the next 2 weeks. So he's got 2 great games this week and 22, whereas he's got two poor fixtures in 23 and 24. So, sorry, not 23 and 24, but rather 21 and 23. So that's kind of the tricky thing that I found where I did end up going for Saul because I didn't think that Rodgers' games were that good. And he struggled, with some of the tougher games as well. So whereas Foden, Saka, and Cunha, these are the types of picks where I won't really feel too bad about owning these players, especially Cunha when Bruno's out. But we do need Mount to be in this team because United still look pretty awful. I mean, having the best fixture of the week by far from a sort of, I guess, team golf standpoint is nice, but actually not being able to sort of make any amends on it is poor. Like, I think if I think about the captaincy, I feel happy about having gone for Haaland because the expectations in terms of the team expectations, I think pretty much lived up with what I thought in terms of City were going to have a really good game for Sunderland, and they had, I think, close to 3xG in that match. So when you compare to, let's say, United, who actually has struggled to actually get what I think like more XG than Wolves within a home game, that's not great because it's not like Wolves are a team, without injuries themselves. And yeah, that's kind of the context for why I'm kind of struggling in FPL to think about why we would need to use certain free transfers. Free transfers I can kind of see for my defense this week because it's poor. But really for the midfield, it really just comes down to whether Palmer's minutes can get good and get good fast. Because whilst there's slightly less turnaround, there's still Champions League around the corner for Chelsea. And as I've been saying, like some teams like Chelsea, for example, are a bit more pressurized to get points in the Champions League because they have dropped points at various points in time. And that Atalanta and Karabakh game are good examples of that. So just going to field this team as it is. In the midfield, or in the front line, we'll go Ekitike and Haaland, as per usual in the 3-5-2. This is a really poor week for defenders. I think, as I said, it's kind of looking at a lot of the DEFCON defenders and hoping for the absolute best this week, despite clean sheet odds being really, really low. But that's kind of, the name of the game. So that's going to be my team selection. I will be waiting more so for the deadline for any news on Keane, for any news on O'Reilly, and possibly I will take my first hit of 2026 here. But Happy New Year to you guys who are watching the videos. Hope you guys have had better game weeks than myself. And yeah, wishing you guys all the best. And we'll catch you guys soon for more content. Take care and goodbye.